Hello, listeners. Welcome to Born Curious, coming to you from Harvard Radcliffe Institute. I'm Heather Min.
And I'm Evelisa Strata. On this podcast, we lead with curiosity, exploring bold ideas and the people behind them.
Today, we're talking with primatologist Rachna Reddy, whose work takes her deep into the rainforests of Uganda, where she studies the social lives of chimpanzees, our closest living relatives.
Rachna has spent more than a decade observing these animals in the wild, tracking how young chimps grow up, navigate friendship, rivalry, loss, and even the anxieties that come with adolescence. Emotions that might feel surprisingly familiar to us.
Her research sheds light on what it means to come of age.
Let's dive in. Hi, Rachna.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so can you tell us about what you study?
A lot of my questions have to do with understanding social relationships and why they have the role that they have in human life. And those questions come out of getting to spend a lot of time in the wild watching our closest living relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees.
While we're recording this, Jane Goodall has recently passed.
Do you want a moment to talk about Jane Goodall and her
Jane Goodall as a person and the work she did in the world were hugely influencing to me. I think a lot of my people who've been core mentors to me are people that work directly with her, like that first generation of students. And I think she's just such a huge inspiration to so many primatologists. To some extent, like zoology prior to her is studying dead animals, not really studying these deep interior lives of animals in the wild as individuals as they interact with members of their own group. And so that was really special. She also collaborated or influenced a lot of psychologists and things, and so there's already like an intersection of a lot of things I'm interested in, and I still read. I mean, even the day that I found out she died, or the day that she died, I was reading her papers and sending them to someone, and they were asking me to comment on something like behavior of individuals toward newborns. Somehow I just feel like everything we know about chimpanzees is in Jane Goodall's 1968 monograph, and that's not true. No, it's not. But there's pieces of it's still a core document. I go back to I believe that was her PhD dissertation. It's not, it's her own really early work. It's not, and so she's still a huge influence in everything that I'm doing. And then of course, just that she dedicated herself to conservation of chimps. And
Why study bonobos and chimpanzees if you're saying you've got questions about humans?
So the way humans live, humans live in such diverse ways in so many different places. So our chimpanzees provide this window into a lot of foundations of human behavior. So humans have been so varied across place and time. I know the way that my grandmother grew up in South India in the 40s was very, very different from how I'm growing up, even though she's one of the main people that raised me. And there's ways, when we're talking with people we know, that we can come to understand how we're shaped by all these cultural factors, all these historical factors, things that affect us in life. Instead of asking those questions to every single person in the world and going back to all these historical sources, things that are important to do, and that are a big part of many different research enterprises. But one other way to answer that question is to go back to what do we share with our two closest living relatives. And those two closest living relatives are bonobos and chimpanzees.
Close how?
Close genetically. So we shared a last common ancestor somewhere between 5 and 7 million years ago, by current estimates.
So you study the chimps at Ngogo. Tell me a little bit about that site.
So Ngogo is a site in Kibale National Park. It's one of several places chimpanzees are studied in Kibale National Park in Uganda. It is the most beautiful place in the world, my favorite place in the world. And chimpanzees have been studied there since beginning in 1993 and then continuously since 1995. And the Chimpanzee Research Project was started by David Watson John Matani, who is my PhD advisor.
How long have you been observing chimps and bonobos?
I first got to study chimps in the wild in 2011, so for 14 years. Wow. Which is amazing. So yeah, and I was, my life has really been shaped by the time I get to spend with them. It's at least a couple of months every year. The longest I've gotten to spend straight has been 15 months.
Wow.
And that was amazing. Yeah, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for. I also don't really know who I would be if I hadn't had all those hours just following them.
What does observing entail? How do you go about doing your work?
So that, I guess you were going to come with me there. What we would do is we would spend, so we would travel to Uganda first. The most important thing is that we are, so one of the biggest threats to these chimpanzees is getting diseases from humans. And diseases that are not often deadly to humans, are like common colds, things we gain immunity to growing up. But common cold viruses can kill chimpanzees, and we might even be asymptomatic for those and pass them. So anyone who's coming into the forest, whether they're coming from a nearby town or have taken an international flight, comes into this quarantine camp, and we all live there together. And it's a structure where we have tents and a couple buildings, but no running water. We have rainwater tanks, and solar electricity for lights and charging some devices, things like that. And we live there together for at least a week, making sure no one has symptoms, sometimes longer. And then if everyone is clear of symptoms and we all test negative for COVID, then we move to our main camp. And that is also a camp where many people from all over the world are living together, and very closely. Sleep in tents primarily. There's a couple of buildings. But the best part is that in the morning, you wake up always when it's still dark, make a little coffee, have your backpack together, and you get to set out into the forest and find the chimpanzees. And that's one of the most thrilling. There's this really intense feeling from the moment you wake up until the moment you find them, when I just am filled with it's both this intensity of momentum and also a kind of dread of it not happening. Because not finding the chimps is one of the worst feelings ever. I feel like it's the whole feeling, all those hours, and you might be hiking many miles during those hours. The feeling is being on the edge of a diving board. I'm about to dive in. I'm about to dive in. I'm about to dive in. And you just are waiting and waiting and waiting. And it can be very, I will say, if I don't find them by 10 a.m., I have to have chocolate. Or I can't, I can't. So it's this high intensity thing. And then you find them and it's I can even, enter an existential crisis in that space of waiting. And then I find them and it's oh, everything's okay.
So in Ngogo, how many chimps are there?
About 200 total individuals. Chimps live in groups that are anywhere, could have maybe 20 individuals in them, but they can be up to 200 individuals. And the community that I study had 200 individuals in it at its height.
Wow, it's a big society.
So in that there's many different families. Males stay in the community they're born in for their whole life. Females immigrate to new communities at adolescence. They may try out different groups, and they may come back and visit their home group and then stay. But once they have a baby in a community, they stay there for life, and they can live, we think, up to 70. So it's this long, the backbone of the community are these old females that have been there a long time. And their kids and mothers and sons, brothers stay together for their whole life. Daughters immigrate in adolescence, and that happens for both chimps and bonobos. They're found only in sub-Saharan Africa. Bonobos are only found in Democratic Republic of Congo, only south of the Congo River. So it's a very small part of the world that they are found in relative to humans who live on all continents except Antarctica.
What you're telling us is that you have seen some behaviors among these chimpanzees and bonobos that we as humans exhibit.
Yes. So when we think about their day-to-day lives and the types of the decisions they make and how they move in their social space, there are elements of it that are really, really similar to humans. So they might seem everyday to us, but they're actually kind of rare in the animal kingdom, broadly speaking. So that is called chimps, bonobos, and humans all live in what we might call fission-fusion societies. And this is a type of group structure that exists in animals where there's many individuals in a social group, but they don't move together as one unit. And the most important piece of it is that it means that you're a social being, you're a social animal, but you can have alone time. And that seems like something that's important. And all people in different places we're living have different degrees of how much we need that. But the idea is the capacity or the ability in your day to be able to shift your company. Now I'm going to be with just my best friend. Now I'm going to be with just my mom. Now I'm going to go to a party with a group of friends. Now I'm going to be alone for 3 days. That kind of choice making is something that we get to do, and that other animals that live in fission-fusion societies get to do.
So they're not just families.
They're not just families. They can be many, many, many different families, many, many different friends. All sorts of dynamic interactions are happening in this space, but it's more like they live in one big city, and there's destinations they can go to in that city where they might run into someone, might not run into them. They're always trying to be at the best parties, to joke that we call their subgroups parties. So that's a scientific jargon term, but it also is very much like when we wake up in the morning in the forest and go out to find them, we're looking for the best party too. And so are the adolescent chimps, looking for the best party. But importantly, that decision of where to move and where to move on your own is a decision that really only comes online in adolescence. And the reason for that is that chimps, when they're young, are almost always following their mothers. But if they're in an event that they're not following their mother, like maybe their mother has died or they're just with a sibling for the day, adults don't tend to leave younger kids alone. So it's really not until they're between 9 and 12 that they really start to wander on their own and make these decisions autonomously. The way that their life is paced, or what we call their life history, is very similar to humans. So the idea is like for the first part of your life, you're just growing, and then you shift to reproducing when you're an adult. But adolescence is this unique period where even in that theoretic, from that perspective, you can reproduce, but you're still growing. So at the very beginning of adolescence, chimps, like adolescent humans, are still like pretty small, scrawny. They haven't had a growth spurt. That's something that happens during this life stage. But they're also not socially adults at all. So even though they could, they become sort of like sexually interested and capable, they're still, the roles they have are not, and the ways other individuals relate to them in their groups are very, very different from the ways that they relate to adults.
So at what ages does this occur, and how long does it last?
The beginning of adolescence is a range. It's very different for each individual, but it seems across chimp groups that this range exists in all groups, and that's like between 8 and 12 years old is often when it begins. But that's a big range, just like it is for humans. 8's quite young, so in the group that I study, it's usually between 9 and 11 that we see this. And it's a dramatic shift. So it's a kind of sudden onset of secondary sexual characteristics. Like suddenly, basically, like their balls drop. So we see this change. And then
Pretty
gross.
comparable. I mean, it's
yeah.
not that far. It's not that far off from when humans experience this life stage.
Exactly. And we see like for males, we see like they stop growing in stature around 15 or so. But then in a lot of places, including the group that I study, they're still not adults and they're still really scrawny at that age. And it's not until the early 20s that they really start to show these behaviors that adults in the group show. But that difference can exist. So in the same forest, same genetic population, actually groups that the chimps immigrate between, we see that they show males are kind of behaving adult-like at earlier ages. But so that there's like I guess you're right. The beginning is pretty inflexible. Like when puberty can start, there's a range and it varies based on different factors. But when it ends, like when you become an adult, can depend on your cultural situation, just like it can for people.
You can see it in behavioral change. Well, among humans, they get kicked out of the home, or they move out, they get a job, or they go to college maybe, or they get married really early, I guess, for humans.
What does it look like?
Yeah, how is it exhibited?
Those are great. Okay, those are great like examples of how humans like when adulthood begins is really blurry, and we have these rituals associated with it. We also have rituals that sort of shape the onset of puberty. So I can give you a couple examples of social milestones that might occur in chimps that signal this. So one might be that if you get recruited to be in a coalition with somebody else. So it's not just that there's distress and someone you care about is in distress and you go to help them. A chimp might do that at any age, though they start doing it more in adolescence. But it's really like somebody is like, we need to go like aggress this other individual. You come with me. And they choose you as their partner. That's like something that doesn't happen in our like until an older age. So you're seen as this like
their
capable
responsibility.
Partner. Yeah, responsibility. Or it might also be, so another thing is that we see an infant chimp, if their mother dies, we often see adoption of that infant, and it's usually by a male. And adolescents will try to adopt kids, but their survival of that kid is better if the male or if whoever adopts them is an adult. So it seems like even though the adolescents have all this like they really show effort to adopt the kid, and it's often their siblings, it's like adults are just better adopted parents. So it doesn't mean it's not that there's not motivation, but it's something about attaining these skills where you're capable of doing something in a social group and you're capable of doing it well.
So can you tell us about any gender differences in you observing adolescence?
So we see adolescence is a time where we see some sex differences in chimp behavior. It's also a time where they learn the social role they have based on their sex, so they start to be treated differently. when they have the onset of these secondary sexual characteristics. So it's a combination of like these internal biological changes that are happening and how they're being treated and learning about their environment. I'm also interested in figuring out ways to track the emotional experiences of adolescent chimps. So in humans, when we say that adolescence is a time people struggle, that also often comes from people reporting symptoms, things that we categorize as disorders that are interfering with their lives, or from writing about this in like art, in art literature, songs. And in chimps, we don't have that self-expression in language of what they're thinking and feeling. But yet, it seems, just from watching them in the wild, that their emotional experiences during social interactions become different in adolescence and more salient. And that can be in both positive and negative ways. So one thing that's different is that prior to adolescence, chimps give this greeting called a pant grunt to all adults. But in adolescence, when they meet a higher ranking individual, an adult, a chimp might go and bow their head up and down, and that might be a combination of things. They're afraid, they're excited. Either way, it's just a more intense situation than it was before. And
Getting
so
like
just
Beatlemania or like Taylor Swift
yeah,
vibes,
right,
like
exactly.
fandom.
Yeah, meeting someone exciting or being scared or being really scared. And maybe there's some combination of both of those. And we're also interested in looking at things like laughter, to see if adolescents, maybe when they're playing or laughing more intensely, just that these situations are like more arousing in adolescence than they were at other periods of life. There are more chimp vocalization. So this is a long distance call a chimp would make, and other chimps in their group would know who this individual was calling. So really important, a chimp with like lots of social partners, like maybe like the alpha male or doesn't have to be alpha, or just somebody that everybody wanted to know where they were. When they hear this call, they would all reply with the call. If an adolescent made it, maybe their mother would respond only. So this is the call.
I love it. What is the response to that?
A big so if it was like somebody important, like once I was with this very elderly male who called, and I think it was maybe the only time I heard him just make this call on his own. He was and pant hooted, and the whole forest erupted. It was like if you imagine from all these destinations. So it's like that is a moment when you hear the response, you see like the map of the fission fusion community. Here are all the destinations. That's where all the food is. That's where everybody's at. And when chimps reply, they're also letting someone know it lets someone know where they are. But sometimes with the adolescent, they might get lost and just go, and we don't hear a response. We don't hear a response. We don't hear a response, and they're searching.
Aw. But you really get a sense of, like you really learn their language in a way while just watching.
I mean, and then I guess that one of the biggest differences with humans is that they don't have narrative language. But yes, exactly. We are plugged in. We are plugged into their language in the sense that it's like their world and what's going on with
Do you
them.
ever like make these calls within their hearing
No.
distance?
No, we're very careful not to do
Yes.
that. So we don't, just in the same way that we don't laugh, and that like if like a young chimp tries to interact or play with us, we wouldn't laugh because another chimp would do that. We're very careful not to do anything that would suggest we were trying to interact with them, just because they would probably like it.
Yeah. You're perfecting the impersonations of
Far
away from
And in fact, we would be careful not even like to play, like if we were watching a documentary or something where there was a pin hoot, we would be very careful not to play that very loud. Just because who knows, just like what if it was a chimp that had died and they heard it? That would be like there's so many ways it could mess up their life.
Do they have funerals?
No, nothing ceremonial.
Okay.
But they do show when they find someone who's dead, they are very, very distressed. And sometimes many individuals will come to look. So when someone dies, it affects them a lot, and is something they appear to all want to learn about. So we can see some origins of maybe the types of emotions and community reactions we would have that create funeral practices and more grief practices we have as humans, none of which are uniform across any society. So they're all their own unique thing. But this is where the foundations of what's going on in chimps can help, because it's like the feeling is there, like some element of it is there.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the bonobos that we should know about?
Yes, I haven't. Okay, so first I'll say that there's a research group that I got to be a postdoc in here, based at Harvard in human evolutionary biology, led by Martin Serbeck, as a bonobo research lab and with comparative things. So that there's like a whole team of people to speak to more about them. But I got to study bonobos in 2021, about 10 years after I first started studying chimps. And even though I've studied them for 14 years, I still feel like I know nothing about chimpanzees. I'll never know everything there is to know about chimpanzees. I am still learning every day. I really know that I know nothing about bonobos, and yet I have learned so much about bonobos. So but bonobos are equally our closest living relative. They're only found in Democratic Republic of Congo. There's far, far, far fewer of them than chimpanzees. So we know a lot less about them, but they have really interesting differences compared to chimpanzees. A lot of things are similar. That fission fusion group, general patterns of their life history. So they have like infancy, juvenility, adolescence, adulthood, old age. Oh, and also females disperse at adolescence, go to totally new groups, leave their group behind, but they don't have warfare that chimpanzees have. So they don't have the period where they team up with each other and like patrol the boundaries of their territories and kill individuals from other groups and take over their territories. That's something chimps do. Bonobos don't do that. And their territories can actually overlap with other groups, and they can have peaceful interactions with other groups. Females, and this is considered to be like one piece of why the groups they don't have this warlike behavior with other groups. Female bonobos are often dominant to males, so usually the highest status individual in a group will be a female, and we don't see sexual coercion like we see in chimpanzees.
Interesting.
So no sexual coercion. And then the other thing that's very different is there are not these chimpanzees. Male chimpanzees have very strong bonds with other males. So the great romances of chimp life are between males. And they groom each other. They may sleep in nests next to each other. Like we see sometimes I've seen like a male chimp build a nest next to another male and then seemingly decide that that's not close enough, and so build one even closer so that it's like they're touching.
It's all about the romance.
Have to be even closer to each other, even closer. So yeah, they have these bonds. Yeah, and then they have sociosexual behaviors. They go on these patrols together. They share meat. They groom each other, and these bonds are very enduring, so they can last a long time. Bonobos don't have that. So the closest bonds, they like chimps. There's close bonds between mothers and offspring that last years, like the whole life of the offspring. And also like chimps, there's really close bonds between mothers and sons. But in bonobos, that's like the most prominent bond in their life. So in chimps, we find like most males, like they have a lifelong bond with their mom. It's different than other relationships. You know, she's never submitting to him. And we find that when they grown-up sons spend less time with their mom, but when they're with her, they're grooming her just as much as the younger sons and everything. So it's like they go home and see mom, like in this colloquial sense, chimps. But bonobos are basically always with their mom, or rarely are they in a party without their mom. And critically, the main way that they seem able to mate and have offspring is all through the influence of their mother.
Really? She's the matchmaker.
The matchmaker, to a degree, yeah. So mothers, and this is will be like if mothers are present, males are more likely to be able to mate. So it's like a whole mother-in-law situation going on with bonobos. But basically, it seems like females are really, really interested in the behavior of the other females. And those relationships are really, really important. But the males are very different. There's something, male bonobos are like always with their mom, always with their mom, always with their mom. And they get beaten up by females and things. And they're a bit more ostracized from the group, where male chimps are in this intense bonded male life with other males that they go into. So bonobo males are lonely.
Oh, really? Oh, no, don't tell me that. Yeah, I can't handle it.
No, so maybe they're not lonely if they have their mom. And they're fine. Then they're like a prince.
We can listen to you talk about what you do out in the rainforest forever, but here you are in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the Radcliffe Institute. What are you working on this year?
So I have 2 projects I'm working on this year. They're both related to what happens in adolescence and this transformative, tumultuous life stage for chimpanzees. So one question is trying to understand the evolutionary origins of social anxiety and why this is something that can be really, really come to interfere with the life of adolescence or become really high during this life stage.
And this is something you see social anxiety in the chimps?
We see something, behaviors that would align with what we might call social anxiety.
What is social anxiety?
So it is a threat response to a social situation. So how we're defining it for chimps in the cross-species context is some kind of fear surrounding going into a social situation that makes you avoid that social situation and might make you avoid it so much that it comes to really interfere with your life and how you want to live your life. So that's how as like a diagnosis, how, or not diagnosis, like a pathology, how I think of it, and I'm defining it in terms that can be applied to chimps and humans. Um, so one of the main projects is really more deeply trying to understand that from an evolutionary perspective. So we are a fission fusion species, so it's very different. Feeling social fear and deciding, do I want to approach or avoid that social situation, is very, very different than it would be for an animal that lived in a group where individuals are all together.
Mm.
So if you've seen like a flock of geese, or even like a monkey, like many species of monkeys, like a macaque group, might be individuals are mostly together, and they might be spread out across the landscape, but they're going to move to destinations together. And if you leave that aggregation, you might get predated. Like, a predator might get you. It's bad to be alone. It's bad to be alone.
Mm.
But something that's special about being an ape is that a lot of apes do spend time alone. And spending time alone is important. And that need we have to socially recharge by having time alone or time with people we feel really, really close to, and then going to a big social situation is natural. Like, it's just part of our way of being.
They're introverts.
They can be, or at least they can be introverts. Yes, many of them are perhaps introverts. Many are extroverts. Like, there's such variation. And I think we don't see that. That's something we really need to understand more deeply as part of being like a chimp, bonobo, or human. But we see like those individual personalities, like things might be present from when they're young, but when they're young, they're really latched onto what their mother wants to do. So and we see huge differences. Like, some female chimps really want to spend time with the group, and they have tons of friends, and so everybody knows their kids. Everybody knows their kids. The kids have to be around everybody, even if maybe those kids don't want to be around everybody. And then some female chimps are like, I don't want to be around at all. I'm only here because I need to eat this food, and then we are leaving as soon as we can. We are leaving. And so this, like, for example, there's this female chimp, Sonia, who rarely spends time with the group. She had an almost adolescent daughter, Virginia, who would be like, she was playing with other kids. They don't know her that well. Like, she's kind of she's kind of an odd one out. Like, she might be watching the others play, but then her mom was leaving and she was whimpering, like didn't want to, like, she didn't want to go, and she had to, but she kind of like looking back this time at the group and at her mom. She's not adolescent at this time, wasn't adolescent yet, and has to go with her mom. So that's just like a difference between that mom and daughter in that case, maybe. But the as an adolescent, she can start to become independent, be with others, but she might have a lot more to learn about her group members because she didn't get this hyper-socialization when she was young. But we think that whatever happens in adolescence with social motivations help you to be able to do that. But this goes back to your question about, are they accepted? And what happens in adolescence is that prior to adolescence, you enter this period where, like, generally group members tolerate you, and they might even take care of you. So if they notice you're somehow separated from your mom and on your own, they'll be vigilant and like stand up on two legs and look back and make sure you're coming. And you get like, tolerance, if not care, from group members as a juvenile chimp, as a kid. And when you're an adolescent, that goes away, and they start not only not to not show you that vigilance, like not wait for you, but they also aggress you and like might beat you up. And that happens for both males and females. For females, that might also happen in like a sexual coercion context, so that only increases in their life, but it starts then in adolescence. And for males, that's like these adult males who were super affectionate to them when they were kids, like playing, buzzing lips, all these things, and playing airplane, or suddenly like, I don't want to cuddle you, and I might beat you up. And so it's like they have this moment of really maybe wanting to cultivate their own social life, make their own social choices, hang out places without their mom, at the same time that everybody's like, I'm going to beat you up now, or I'm going to ignore you now. I don't care about you coming. And contending with that, like both being socially ignored and threatened at the same moment, is something that can really create situations where you have an experience that makes you really scared. And then you have something like social anxiety because you're afraid to go to others, yet you have the motivation to go to them. And so that fear is interfering with your life. So I'm trying to understand that. That's one piece of the Red Cliff Project, looking over my like years of behavioral data that I've collected. So all the behaviors I described are things I systematically quantify, like how frequently they're happening for each chimp or how frequently they're doing them.
That sounds like a lot, but you have another project.
Yes. The other project is writing a coming-of-age novel that tells the story of an adolescent chimpanzee who I studied named Booker. And understanding his how he tried to understand his place in the world of male chimps. And the world of male chimps, right before his community entered this vision, like a civil war in the chimpanzee group, and how Booker sort of finds his place in that group as a time that it's really breaking apart. And then there's another main character who is a a female chimpanzee. And in contrast to Booker, she's one of the oldest individuals in the group, but somebody that immigrated to the group when she was an adolescent, as adolescent females do. So it's this end of like this life stage where she knows everything and the community is breaking apart, but has just decades and decades of knowledge over more than 50 years of the group.
And so you're fictionalizing, but are taking it from real life events.
Yes.
Okay.
So of course I don't know what their actual memories are, what they were thinking in the situations, but a lot of the novel is drawn from events I witnessed. And I go back to my data, like trying to remember exactly in this moment who touched who groomed with who screamed when this person charged or this chimp charged, screamed. So I want it to be as accurate as possible. But the point of it being fiction and to imagine their thoughts and imagine their memories and things is so that I can have a way to really tell the story of their lives that will resonate with more people. So I have this special, like, we've been talking about these special experiences, getting to really know all these individuals and spend time with them. It's just the greatest privilege of my life to know them. And I really want to be able to share that.
So what I'm hearing is that Booker is your favorite.
He's not. No, he is. Yes, he is, but they're all my favorite.
I am curious to learn more about how you collaborate with scholars in other fields.
Yes, I found that one of my favorite parts of being an academic is getting to understand these questions that I've come to ask by understanding what other people are asking, how they're asking it, the sort of problems they run into of really trying to understand something and why it happens, and getting to discuss that. So I, in my own training, there's a lot of working with researchers studying many different species. And as I've come to this, my own training really began with like a big multi-species approach, that to understand why something's happening, you really have to understand its place in the phylogeny, like in the evolution, in basically like the family tree as it like of all living things.
Can you give us an example?
Yes. So I think most mammals, the moment that they go through puberty is the moment they become an adult. The moment they're weaned, the moment they no longer need to be nursing from their mother, they also are an adult who could reproduce. So that's something that might happen to a mouse. So I'm nursing from my mother. I have weaning and puberty occur within a couple of days. So I stop nursing and I go through puberty and then I leave my den and all these really interesting things or like behaviors are motivated by that pubertal onset happening, and they're really like there's still a lot of learning going on. But what happens for another subset of animals is something different. So you're weaned, you spend a while before you go through puberty, being in the stage where you're a child still because you haven't gone through puberty, but you're not nursing. And that's something that we see in a lot of other animals, like dogs do that. So animals that they're maybe learning how to forage and hunt with their group, that's pretty familiar to us. So that's called like a juvenile stage. So they have infant, juvenile, adult. Chimps and bonobos have something different, and humans. They have infant, juvenile, adolescent, adult. And that adolescent stage is one where puberty starts or puberty's happening, but you're still not an adult. And it's a long time before you're fully grown, and you have many years of needing to learn things and be in the world, but you're not an infant, you're not nursing, you're also not a child that hasn't gone through puberty. And when you go through puberty, you become a competitor to others. So that feeling of like you're a child, everyone tolerates you, they maybe take care of you, versus you're an adolescent, you're now a threat. But you're also not very capable at being an adult yet. So you have to learn, you have to interact, but you're also a threat. We have a really prolonged period of that. So do chimps and so do bonobos seem to as well.
And it seems as though being an adult is really what others are thinking of you and how they're treating you and how you see yourself because of that.
Yes, that's a really good way of phrasing it, is like, what is it, or the definition of adulthood and being how others treat you. And so one question, is going back to your original question of like, what do I learn from studying multiple species, is that we don't see that really long adolescence. So all species have some, like there's still something like an adolescence, or there's like an adolescence happening, even if it's a couple of days, that's still an adolescence for a mouse. But there's a certain subset of species where we see that period being really long and really unique social experiences happening in that period, like following around someone who's not your parent and learning from them, like a mentor-like individual, or dispersing to a new group and working really hard to integrate into that group, like we see in chimps and bonobos. Females, chimps and bonobos both do that during adolescence. This is a working hypothesis of this group and others that we really think adolescence is something about that prolonged social adolescence is about really forming identity where you give something to others, they give something to you. So the multi-species thing is important for understanding like what even is adolescence. Like we can think about what it means in humans, but only when we place it in the context with like, wait, most mammals don't do this. Most mammals are doing something else. Only then does it really seem like we can get at what it means, and that's something.
They're not on TikTok all day, but it's a thing. It's a real thing.
But why do they want to go on TikTok all day? And why do they want to do it more than adults might want to do it? Or more than kids might want to do it. Like there's reasons that like social information is being shared there in a way where that's more salient to adolescents, and why.
Yeah. And you mean human adolescence,
Human
not the
adolescents,
chimp.
yeah, not the chimpanzees, yeah. So there are some experimental studies done in like zoos and sanctuaries where chimps do like to watch videos of other chimps. These are chimps that are in captive situation. So they they're curious. Yeah. Another really fruitful collaborative area in science that I found in recent years is working with clinical psychologists and neuroscientists. I mean, we talked about how, of course, it's not a relationship. I don't interact with the chimps directly, but I love them and I care about them so deeply as individuals, even though they are like, they're in my papers, they're data points and things. But I have found there's not only a connection and similarities of questions of clinical psychologists really trying to understand why do certain social experiences result in changes in us at these certain transitions in life, like adolescence or having a new baby or getting older. Like why do we struggle? Not only are those questions similar, but there's also this like love of like they care a lot about individual people when they're doing that work. We are trying to understand big phenomena with data points, trying to figure out how to have enough data, but we still care about the individual so deeply, and I think that that's been a really fruitful area for like a lot of collaboration.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I really, as you were talking about the chimps, I thought, wow, there's a real psychological kind of aspect to what you're doing. So, and I was going to ask whether you have any training in psychology or whether that's something that you're collaborating with other people.
Yes. So my training is also in psychology. So primarily anthropology. But yeah, so I'm also, I guess I consider myself, anthropologist and psychologist.
Okay.
Both. But I thought you were asking about the psychology or just like what I go through in studying them. And I will say it's very hard. I don't think I could do this without like the community of people who also study the chimps and love them. And that community is like people working at my site, but also at other sites. I rely on that a lot, I think.
Because you witness a lot of difficult things.
Yeah, a lot of violence and a lot of death, and it's and they also experience things that like watching them experience loss is very hard. So I think that that's something.
These chimps, these animals are endangered. Am I right?
Yes. So both chimpanzees are endangered. There's estimated by the IUCN to be 170 to 300,000 left in the wild. And for bonobos, it's far fewer, only 15 to 20,000 estimated to be left in the wild. And those numbers are dwindling. We're at a moment where it's so important that we're working always to conserve these species.
So how much of your work is observing and how much of your work is, if any, just being involved in conservation and making a case for their habitat?
So conservation is one of the major goals of the Ngogo Chimpanzee Project. And importantly, the chimps that I compared to like chimps as they are all over the world, the chimps I study are relatively well protected. They're part of a national park in Uganda, so they have like the protection that's given to those parks. We do really need to work to innovate ways or come up with ways for chimps and humans to coexist. So a couple ways that I contribute specifically are doing a lot of sharing of knowledge about chimps. A lot of that I do with members of our local field team who lead those efforts. So, for example, a couple of people from our local field team, one Diana Conwary, Brian Kamagisha, organized some screenings of Chimp Empire in villages surrounding Kiwali National Park. And because this is a film it's like shown to international audiences on Netflix, it's narrated in English. So, but they get to have screenings of this film around the park. And Diana Conwary wrote like a play that we acted in that is about that's in a local language. And she wanted me to act in the first one, so I've got to be in that play. And the plays would like precede the screening.
I love that.
And then there was so fun. So that's like the most recent thing I did. And I've also done a lot with our field team too, like with local schools in the area and supporting schools, but science fairs and things too. But as well, like also just talking about chimps.
So education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of my core goals and where I think I can contribute most is that I really want to train the next generation of Ugandan scientists, like making like to lead these efforts moving forward. So I've been so fortunate to get to learn from chimpanzees for almost 15 years, but whether someone will be able to do that, the next generation to study them as long, I think is unclear. And it's something I want to work toward making sure happens. And part of why I want to write the book is to share things about chimps for the next generation and to motivate more scientists, more people to care about chimpanzees and learn about them. I really want people to have a deeper understanding of the emotional lives of chimps and just how much we can learn from them and how many deep questions about ourselves and our relationships they can help us to understand and know that if they're gone, we lose that. We lose not only these individuals, but we lose an opportunity to really understand some element of where we come from or some element of all the things that we share and have shared with people for all of the history of our species. So the themes of the novel are really about mothers and sons, relationships between brothers, just things changing across generations and communities coming together, breaking apart, or things that have affected humans for all of our history to our knowledge. And there's certain things we can learn from chimps about all those things. So that's why I want to write the novel.
It is really thrilling to listen to you speak with such excitement about the work that you do and the chimps and the bonobos that you know and study. How did you, when did it occur to you that I should be a primatologist?
So I did not understand that this could be a career at all. And I think I was really lucky. In my first week of college, I applied for a job. There was a fair for jobs the first week of college. Students could apply for on campus. And I met a graduate student was doing a project on lemurs. So this was at Duke University. Duke had a lemur center, a really strong biological anthropology with primatology program. And then I didn't get the job, but the graduate student just said to me, who ended up becoming a mentor, said, you seem really interested. We have these things called lab meetings. And if you want, you can just come to the lab meeting and you can see research people are doing. And then I'm probably going to hire another person soon. And so that happened. And then I eventually became part of this lab. And at these lab meetings, I learned, I just had no idea that this whole world existed. So people were studying lemurs, but they were also studying apes. And I would hear presentations for graduate students on what they were working on and just this whole world of people studying primates in the wild. And then the PI of that lab was Brian Hare, and this is Evan McLean, the grad student. And then they both were just these incredible mentors to me, all of undergrad. And then about 2 years later, Ann Pusey, who is one of the first, in that first group of students to work with Jane Goodall, a leader of the Gombe chimpanzee research, she came to Duke, and so she was a core mentor of mine and still is. And I just had this amazing opportunity to learn about all these things that were going on, and through them, got this opportunity. And funding from my university, to go get to work with wild chimps as an undergrad, which was incredible. And then I got hooked.
As an undergrad.
Yeah, which was pretty wild. Yeah. That kind of mentoring also is, when going back to the conservation question, I think is something I've really been working to do too in Uganda. So we've had now a couple of times an internship for undergraduates or near just graduating undergraduates.
And this echoes the earlier part of the conversation where you talked about, chimps adopting younger chimps.
There was mentoring. Yeah. Mentoring is something that has deep evolutionary roots. Yes, exactly.
At this point, are there any conclusions or that you can make about adolescence in humans as a result of your work?
Yes, I think so one view of adolescence, an old view of it, would be called a constraint view. So that there's nothing that we have this adolescent period where we can reproduce but haven't finished growing just because we need to wait to get big enough and strong enough, and that basically it's just a period you have to survive. A constraint, I guess
You have to go to junior high.
Yeah. Yeah, you just survive this period and then you'll be bigger and you can be a competitor. But a lot of this research about the complex relationships individuals are forming during adolescence despite receiving all these threats suggests that that's not something much more complicated is going on, and actually it seems like a really important period for learning. and for learning how to become a competent, socially integrated adult. So for chimps, I'll give some examples that if you really expected that, like, okay, you're in adolescence, just like tough it out till you're like big and strong enough to like compete in this world. We might see that adolescent males, in particular, might like avoid other males. Like they wouldn't want to be around these other male competitors. They might like beat up younger individuals and might beat up like their peers. But we actually see that they don't engage in any conflict with their peers, and they actually show a lot of caregiving behaviors to younger individuals. So rather than being aggressive, they like I described like that they can adopt younger kids, and then they spend all this time following around older male chimpanzees. So they're actually like spending time with their competitors. They're caring for younger individuals. So it's really more, it does seem like that we see these elements in chimps of like the learning of a lot of pro-social behaviors and really learning to socially bond and integrate more than just compete or more than wait to compete.
And all that is happening with humans.
Yes. Yeah. So it gives us some lens into that being important for humans. Yeah. That's what this period is about. And it is, like, adolescence is the period too to learn how to coerce other individuals. And another component is in chimps. We see even in like coercion that they're learning, like males are learning to coerce females during this period of time, that it's not effective. It's not very effective to coerce them unless they're also friends with them and the females like them.
Mm-hmm.
So even these like really coercive behaviors have some element of really needing to be skilled socially, where individuals like you and you contribute something to the relationship, even if you then use that to like manipulate them into what you want them to do. It's really important that you can cultivate these really complex skills of being liked.
Mm. So you talk about, how privileged you feel to observe these chimps as much as you do. Can just a regular person go do that? Could I go and observe the chimps? Is there a way to do that?
There are the national parks in Uganda, where the country that I primarily work in, do have permits for tourists to go with tour companies with park rangers to observe chimpanzees in the wild. That's something you can, I think, search for online. The Uganda Wildlife Authority is the park service that's done through. But it's very important. The things I described of how we really need to protect chimps from human diseases are part of this too. So there's restrictions to the distance you can be from the chimps, wearing masks, face masks, using hand sanitizer, all of these things. Even if you don't feel sick, even if you've been vaccinated against the flu and COVID, it doesn't mean that you couldn't have something that could pass to a chimp and kill them. So yes, it'd be important to enjoy them, learn about them, share all that you can about them, ask your ranger guides questions. They're very knowledgeable. But make sure you do follow those rules to respect the animals and give them the distance and space they need, and don't kill them.
So we can ensure that they're there for the next generation. Well, Rachna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been just really cool and really fun to learn about these incredible animals with you.
I just say thank you and Chimp.
To say, thank you and Chimp. Maybe we would embrace, and I would go. Instead, I'll just say thank you. Thank you it's been great talking with you, and thanks for giving me a chance to share.
Thank you.
That concludes today's program.
Born Curious is brought to you by Harvard Radcliffe Institute. Our producer is Alan Grazioso. Anna Song and Cabin 3 Media provided editing and production support. Many thanks to Jane Huber for editorial support. And we are your co-hosts. I'm Evelise Estrada.
And I'm Heather Min.
Our website, where you can listen to all our episodes, is radcliffe.harvard.edu/borncurious.
If you have feedback, you can email us at info@radcliffe.harvard.edu.
You can follow Harvard Radcliffe Institute on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Threads. And as always, you can find Born Curious wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for learning with us.
And join us next time.